digitaljamsessions.com.
Welcome back to the Digital Jam Sessions and thank you for listening. You may have noticed that we've stopped numbering the sessions within the audio itself, but we'll still be numbering the sessions when we actually publish them. As always, I'd ask you to bear with us on the audio quality. We're learning as we go and we are improving, hopefully, with each session. We hope you enjoy today's session. Today we're joined by Gabby Hersham from Huckletree once again. Welcome back, Gabby. And John Cadden from
Business Rocks.
Business Rocks, that's what we're calling it today, Business Rocks. So if you could explain a little bit more about what Business Rocks is all about, John, that would be awesome.
Absolutely, Tanya. Yeah, no worries. So basically, I'm creating Manchester's version of Dublin's Web Summit meets South by Southwest in the USA meets Apps World London for Manchester, a global stage to put all the entrepreneurs and the tech creators, the digital content creators of Manchester on a global stage, and also channel inward investment into Manchester and basically unite the United Kingdom, bring up the tech cities of London, bring down the Sunderland Science Park, Liverpool One, and just unite, basically give the Northwest a stage to promote itself on.
Awesome. And just so that people get a kind of a sense of the scale and scope of Business Rocks, what kind of capacity are we talking here?
The launch event in May is Thursday the 7th of May is 220 people, and then it gets a little bit more exciting in 2016 when we go to 5,200 delegates per day over 2 days. So that's 10,400 delegates, 300 international speakers, 2 stages, 4 different after parties. We've got speakers coming in from Silicon Valley, Vegas, Paris, Berlin, Sweden, to name just a few. We've got lots and lots of crazy stuff going on.
Awesome and exciting. And Gabby, for those who weren't on one of our previous sessions, would you like to reintroduce yourself and the lovely world of Huckletree?
Huckletree is, in a nutshell, Huckletree is a co-working space in London. We've got a wide community of startups and innovators. We've got about 25 different startups at the moment, and we carefully curate the startups that we bring in, and we give them really gorgeous office space, and we build the community so that they have people to bounce ideas off and collaborate with.
Wonderful. The reason that we've got the lovely Gabby and the lovely John on the call today is because we wanted to take a look at this notion that perhaps the new startup industry and landscape as such is a little bit too London-centric. And I would love to hear your thoughts at this point, John, in terms of how much government support do you feel that there is realistically outside of London, and do you feel that there are specific types of programme that are working really well outside of London, or do you feel that there is a complete lack of support for you up there?
Absolutely. I would say that there's a lot of support at the minute. You got people like Doug Ward, who's over at Spaceport X. Those guys just got £4 million funding announced last week. We've got people like Barclays who are sponsoring the escalator. So that's another tech accelerator that's coming in Manchester. And we've got literally, I can name 4 or 5 more different kind of investment programs at various different stages of the startup ecosystem, which are funding startups in Manchester. There's so much going on in Manchester at the minute. It's unbelievable.
And what about in London, Gabby? By comparison, do you feel like maybe there's too much going on there, or do you feel like it's just the right level of support that we have in London?
I mean, it would be very hard for me to say that there's too much support. I don't think I would ever go as far as to say that. I think there's definitely, a lot of support in London. It's demonstrated by how the ecosystem in London is growing faster than digital hubs around the world, including New York. So on the one hand, I do think that's an amazing thing, and I think it's obviously really attractive for people to come and start their businesses in London. On the other hand, I also realise that it's really important for us to support these networks outside London as well, that are equally important in the growth of our economy.
So I'm curious, because I know that this is an area that we've spoken about before, Gabby, but I'm curious to hear John's kind of take on this, which is that we've spoken in the past, John, about kind of youth culture and this notion that actually we're kind of, encouraging a generation to consider new startups and entrepreneurialism as their next step in terms of education, rather than necessarily going through further education. Do you think that sentiment is prevalent up there in Manchester?
From what I can see at the minute, it's absolutely red hot. I was at Old Granada Studios last Wednesday night, and I was completely and utterly blown away. They had uni students from up and down the country, but predominantly Manchester, at Manchester Entrepreneurs Network, and they was actually pitching to the CEO of Boohoo. He announced the guys that was doing the presentations. Then there was literally 8 student presentations, but they actually had fully functioning app businesses while they're also at the same time doing the degree. And I'm talking about app businesses which have got a proper business model, scalable, massive global scalable business model, and they're already generating revenue. It was really inspiring. But yeah, I think there's a massive wave of energy building to be an entrepreneur, and it's also it's off the back of things like Dragon's Den, Alan Sugar, and coming out the back of a recession. There's a lot more positivity around, isn't there, at the minute? So I think that to be an entrepreneur in this day and age is a little bit easier because you've got the digital platforms and a lot more support, and it's a bit more of a mature, cross-promoted entrepreneurial environment, I think.
So, having said that, I'm curious to hear, Gabby, your point of view on this, which is, it's great that we're encouraging this entrepreneurialism and that we're kind of, teaching this next generation that actually, maybe further education isn't the be all and the end all, and kids are literally throwing up businesses as they get to university and college. But do we think that there is perhaps a danger or a risk that we are not giving them enough, tools and equipping them completely in terms of this whole kind of arena of new startup and entrepreneurialism? Because even for the fully fledged adults in the world, it's a tough business. It's a tough thing to do. Do you think that perhaps that they're rushing into it a bit?
I would say, of course there is an argument to be made that university is really important, and I'm not one to kind of go against that. But I also think that from my own experience, the best experience that you can have really is the practical experience. And it's being out there and putting together your business plan, coming up with ideas, understanding what your revenue streams will look like, running your numbers, building your team, managing your team, getting your product out to market, and refining it when need be. And I just don't think that a lot of those are courses that are taught at university. From my perspective, I think that, I know when I'm hiring people, I don't even look at what university they went to. I look at what experiences they've had and what they've taken from them and what they can bring to the table. So I don't see it as a bad thing.
Okay. So, assuming that we think it's a good thing to encourage entrepreneurialism and get people into new startups as a learning experience, obviously there are very particular challenges and issues that new startups face, and both of you working within this space, I'd be interested to hear what your top 3 kind of tips or kind of guidance points are for people entering into this arena of new startup. Let's start with you, John.
Top 3 tips, I would say, not from someone who's getting a job in a startup. I will give you my top 3 tips as someone who has started 2 businesses with nothing, and literally, as an example, Business Rocks has been started with 0 in the bank, and we're scaling it just with equity at the minute and working against all the challenges, working against all the odds. I would say tip number 1 is understand your marketplace, and with the product that you've got, make sure that it is correctly aligned to that marketplace, and you've got your stall set out so that you can attack the marketplace in the right manner, and it will be received in the correct manner. Don't go with a mixed message. Know exactly your market and know that proposition is for that market. That would be one, or else you'd be wasting your time and precious time and unfunded resources. Tip number 1. Tip number 2 would be work harder than anybody else, work smarter than your competition, and study your competition and learn from your competition. Tip number 3 would be get Twitter on your mobile phone. It is the number 1 it's the best business development tool I can possibly tell you in the world. I've only been using it since I started Business Rocks. I used it a little bit with my digital media recruitment business, but since starting Business Rocks, it gives you the path that you need to all your competition, all your market. And as an example, I'm doing a presentation in Manchester at the Escalator on Wednesday night for Eventbrite on social media, which is kind of ironic when I don't even have a degree and I've only been using Twitter for, let's say, 11 months, but I'm lecturing all these degree qualified people who've studied social media for the last 4 years. What I will be saying on that is that it is the most powerful business development tool. I was looking to get hold of the directors of Mozilla Firefox to try and get them to come and speak in 2016. I found that the global director for Mozilla on a Monday night at 10:10 in the evening was based in Edinburgh. So I just direct tweeted him, check this link out, would you be interested in 2016? Within under 2 minutes, he'd come back to me and we were taking the conversation onto email, and I've now got the contact details of the global marketing director for Mozilla Firefox. It's such a powerful tool, I can't underplay that enough.
Awesome. And what about you, Gabby? What would your top 3 tips be?
I definitely agree with the Twitter one, and the rest of them as well. Mine would be, my first tip would be just build your minimum viable product, your MVP, and get it out to market as early as you can, and with as little investment as you can possibly get it out there with. So that would be my first one. My second one, it's really something that I kind of take on board really proactively, is run a lean business model. So just spend your the capital that you've raised or your kind of revenue wisely and only where need be. And the third one would be you don't have to obviously start your startup in London, but I would definitely try to start it in a digital cluster, one of the digital clusters around the UK. So whether that's London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, any of the enterprise zones, but definitely I think there's something to be said for locating yourself near other startups. You'll have access to a larger talent pool and events, and there's just a better infrastructure built for support. So that would be my third tip.
Interesting. So you're talking about kind of starting up where there is kind of an existing hub or community. So I'm curious, if I was to say to each of you, what are the reasons for basing yourself either in London or in Manchester, what you would say to me. So what would be your argument for Manchester, John?
Manchester will give you 30 to 40% reduction on London in cost of hire, in cost of office space, and in cost of housing and accommodation for yourself and your staff. We're uber well connected. You've got clusters like Media City, you've got the SIART project, you've got the Northern Quarter, and you've got City Centre Manchester, to name just a small selection of what's going on here. But you've got a lot of entrepreneurs which I've met, which are very, very passionate about the city, and they will meet you any time of day and night and strategize and talk to you and help and support you and mentor you. The city has been unbelievable to me, and the network of people, this door that has opened up since I've started Business Rocks, has been insane. They can't help you enough.
Okay, so Gabby, what would you say to that in terms of London?
I would say that London, first of all, London has seen so many success stories that investors really do kind of seem to be drawn to London. I know that between 2010 and 2013, investment was raised up to £1.4 billion, I think, in different startups in the city. So London has a natural kind of attraction to it. I also think that there's just so many accelerators and incubators for startups in London, which are really, really helpful for any startup that's launching. There's 32, I think, in London out of about 50 in the whole of the UK. And also, if you start up in London, you'll be amongst the likes of the big tech companies that are already here, like Facebook, Google, Twitter, Amazon, etc., etc.
She's name dropping. I can't believe it.
So there you go. Look, I don't want to, I do obviously see the value of starting a startup anywhere in London, be it in Manchester. So I'm just highlighting the good things about London, but I'm sure there are many, many, many about starting a startup elsewhere as well.
So I'm curious in terms of you work in this kind of new entrepreneur environment. You're working with new startups. That takes a certain type of mindset. That takes a certain type of personality to work in those kind of environments. Being slightly more agile minded and being a bit quicker to pivot or change our direction. But it also requires a certain different attitudes towards technology and the way that we utilize technology, as John kind of exampled with Twitter. So I am curious to ask you, what are your top apps in terms of things that help you be productive as somebody who works in the new entrepreneur space or kind of the new startup space? What is your favourite app? And you can't say Twitter, John.
Ooh, it would have been Twitter without a doubt. I'm literally super glued to it. I can see my fiance's eyes looking at me on a Saturday afternoon when she sees me retweeting content. Or mine would have to be Twitter. Just standard Twitter, Sky. Honestly, Twitter's the backbone of what I'm doing at the minute. LinkedIn is the app, but it's very, very saturated. Pretty much. My CTO is trying to get me to use Slack and stuff for collaboration, but I'm that focused on business development and bringing in new customers and new speakers that all these apps that keep getting thrown at me, I'm just, unless it's something that's as game changing as Twitter, I don't really have time to just digest them.
Okay. What about you, Gabby? What's your app of the moment?
So Slack, I mentioned, was a really good one just to keep track of any projects that are on your pipeline and what everyone's to-do list looks like. And Sunrise is a calendar app that syncs all of your calendars, your individual calendars of your own and also your other team members' calendars. And it's just a good way of making sure that nothing is ever forgotten. So that would be my other one.
So in terms of working with new startups and kind of the emerging trends that you're seeing, do you think there's any particular type of business that you're really seeing a huge amount of at the moment, Gabby?
Yeah, I mean, being in London, we see a lot of fintech and e-commerce. I think that's kind of what London is kind of developing notoriety for. Those are kind of the ones we see. We also see a lot of different recruitment platforms and a lot of content as well, a lot of content platforms.
Okay, and what about up there, John? What do you see a lot of up there in Manchester?
Fintech, yeah, we're getting a lot of that up in Manchester. I'd say we're getting marketing platforms. There's a big one that's just come out up here, which, well, he's been launched for around about just over 12 months. A guy called Jamil at Wakelet, he's just got a large amount of funding and he's going for more funding now. And that's like how to organise yourself online, organise your football team, Manchester United or big football teams, just so that when you log onto About Us page, you can get a visual representation of exactly what's going on via pictures and organise all your press releases, your videos of all different kinds of stuff in one place. Really cool. Wakelet.com, check that out. It's really interesting. But yeah, there's obviously the e-commerce. There's a massive broad mix of things that are going on up in Manchester.
I'm curious to understand what your take on this is, guys, because one of the original kind of questions on the agenda for today was this notion that when we look at the new startup world and the nature of the people that inhabit this ecosystem, they tend to be folk that don't really stick around for a huge amount of time. You know, your average lifespan may be somewhere in the region of about 18 months tenure at a given business before they kind of move on and try the next thing, if it's not working. So do you think that there is an inherent shift in the way that the workplace is changing as a result of this kind of the way that new startup types behave and their thinking, John?
I think that the shift, the people are spending less time at work because there's a huge global talent shortage. That is one thing. There's a lot more startups coming onto the scene, and startups have this perception of being really cool and vibrant places to work. Some of them that get a lot of good funding really are. Some of them are really hard places to work. A lot of them are really hard places to work. You got to remember that a massive percentage of them crash and burn and don't make it to be the next Google or the next Facebook. But across industries, across digital agencies, because obviously I've got Fluid Recruitment, which has been a 10-year established digital media tech recruitment business. There's a trend across a wider business that people are moving more often because of things like LinkedIn. People are getting stalked, people are getting offered more money, but there is definitely a talent shortage, and that is only going to be made worse by all this money, all these £billion funds, all these tech clusters and all these accelerators. They're all pouring money into all these startups, and at this minute today, before all these startups start with their visions and their 5-year growth plans, there's a tech shortage, there's a talent shortage now. So you get all this money, you get all these business plans and all these ideas for growth, but we're already struggling for talent now in the UK. So if all these businesses can't execute all this software, all this research and development, and expand all these platforms, if there's no talent if there's not going to be enough talent to execute the vision.
What I'm interested to really kind of get to the heart of is this notion that we're teaching a generation of people to not really have loyalty to their business, if that makes sense, because we are kind of encouraging people to hop from company to company, and certainly in the digital new startup space and the games industry, as a for example, people move from business to business, and they come back to businesses, or they go into partner businesses, and they're moving about so much between these businesses. There's no such thing nowadays as a job for life.
What I would say is that it's the market that is driving up the value of the talent. So you've got a uni student that comes out of uni, he gets 2 years developing iOS applications and Android applications under his belt on like a 25, 30 grand base. And within 2 years, he's set up his own contracting company, and he's gone contracting, and he's earning £500-600 a day. So the startups can't then afford to employ him. They can't afford to get the projects done. So what people are doing is that I know that a lot of startups in Manchester are getting deep in bed with the universities, working with the talent on their degrees, training them up, and then what they're doing is doing share option schemes to tie that talent into their projects. But even that sometimes isn't enough to keep them in the game, because they've got short-term aspirations for mortgages or holidays or nice things that people want in life, and that takes over.
So do you think this is part of what's encouraging this kind of investment overseas, when we see development hubs emerging out of places like India or Poland?
Well, that's what it will be, yeah. Outsourcing and all those different kinds of industries are booming off the back of talent shortages in this country. But then quite often when you're working with I know a lot of companies which have tried working with outsourced development teams, and it's all lost in translation, a lot of it. And they have a test with them, and then quite often it just breaks down because their projects are just messed up and all different kinds of problems occur. So you're better off working with the talent that's around you, I find.
We see at Huckletree, we do see a lot of businesses that are coming in and moving in. Typically, their teams have tended to stay with them, and even when the businesses kind of grow and need to move out of Huckletree because they're too large and they're looking for their own office space, they still tend to take their teams with them. So I don't see a lot of people kind of jumping ship and chopping and changing jobs a lot, probably because it is so hard to find good talent and the market is so saturated. Perhaps these companies are doing what they can to incentivize their teams to stay with them in terms of kind of good packages or good incentives, good bonus structures or whatnot, to make sure that their team members and their talent stay with them, because it is hard to find good talent.
Okay, so do you think that that perhaps there is a difference in the culture of startup in London? If you think that people are sticking with those businesses, then perhaps maybe in other parts of the country.
I think it's definitely becoming more of a talents market, in that the talent can decide where they want to go and how long they want to stay there, because there are loads of jobs available and not that many people with the right experience or the right skill sets applying for them. And you only need to look at all the job listing websites for Tech City to see how many jobs are being listed on a daily basis. It's quite incredible.
So do you think that there is this notion that we're actually cultivating these individuals who are, to some extent, not employable by the traditional standard? These are people who are very independent thinking and have very much their own pick of what they're going to do, and can very much set their own terms in terms of how they work with the business. Do you think that we're beginning to see an emergence more of kind of freelance and contract hires versus actual PAYE employees?
Yeah, 100%. There's a definite shift to contract, but I would strongly agree with that 100%.
What about you, Gabby?
I mean, there are definitely, many more freelancers and contract hires now than there were a few years ago. I think more and more people are doing their own thing, and probably that has roots in the recession and in people being laid off. And I think also for the companies, I mean, PAYE, it is a big burden on the companies, and more often than not, it is much easier to hire somebody on a contract on a contract basis instead of as full time.
So, is there any kind of tips that you would give to somebody who's looking to, unleash their potential and step away from the corporate environment and into freelancing or contracting for new startups? Is there any kind of significant advice that you would give to them, Gabby?
I would say, depending on what industry they're in, I would say that they should definitely connect to the kind of networks within their industry. So I know that if they are kind of freelance artists, graphic designers, web designers, etc., they should definitely be on something like Behance, where they could put their portfolio out there and start getting jobs right from the offset. And similar kind of websites exist across all kind of the different domains and industries. So I would definitely say start getting involved with one of those where you can put your portfolio online and start getting work.
Okay, and what about you, John? What would be your top tip to somebody starting out on this freelancing?
Yeah, they might not be the right person for the startup scene. So I would say if you're coming from a big corporate where you've been wrapped in cotton wool and you've got all the resources there at your fingertips and you've got these big budgets which you can just burn and not worry about. It's a completely different game when you're in an unfunded startup and you've got to wear 50 different hats. You might not be that kind of person. So what I would say is dip your toe in the water in a number of different ways. Attend the networking events. There will be a million different networking events, whether it's fintech, media, tech media, all different kinds of networking and meetups throughout the calendar month in your city. Get on Elance, do it. You could do projects in the evening, and this will just let you dip your toe in the water without risking your mortgage or your sanity. And I'm sure you can work out what's best for yourself then.
Interesting that you talk about this notion of corporate staff being kind of wrapped in a little bit of cotton wool, and I suppose that what we're referring to there is really the realities of, as you say, having to wear multiple different hats and being kind of a bit more resourceful when we work in new startup. But I'd be interested to hear your kind of snapshot view of what you think are the key differences for the corporate environment versus the new startup environment, because I appreciate that not all of our listeners will necessarily be in a new startup yet. They may be thinking about moving out of corporate into new startup. So what would you kind of say are those key differences, Gabby?
Two major differences from my perspective are the first one being that in the startup world, people get their hands dirty and people contribute to all different parts of the company's business. And I know that from my limited experience working in the corporate world that people typically have their one function that they perform really, really well. Point two, I was saying, is that in the startup world, in the corporate world, people are used to clocking in and out, being at the office at 8:30 or 9 and leaving at 5:30 or 6. And in the startup world, regardless of whether you're a founder or a co-founder of the business, it doesn't work that way, and people just seem to work around the clock to hit the target.
So, John, what would be, by comparison, what's your insights in terms of what are these key differences that anybody who's not aware of what it's like to be in a new startup should really be aware of?
You need to be ready for anything at any time, because it's so much more raw. That for an example, I was with the guys from Hello Soda Software this week. I had a couple of beers telling them about the 2016 event which is coming, and they're going to take a stand there to exhibit there. But as an example, their CTO is not the client facing element of their business, and the two directors which are client facing, for whatever reason, they couldn't make this appointment. So the CTO, who's relatively introvert in comparison to the other directors, he wound up having to pitch at the last minute at the Palace in front of hundreds and hundreds of investors, and he was completely out of his comfort zone. But they've qualified to the final 50, and he actually had to walk up. They got number 14, and the CTO had to walk up to the guys at the end and go, "Excuse me, I believe you've just called my name out." And they're like, "Yeah, Soda Software, you're going through to the final whatever." And he's like, "Are you sure? My pitch was rubbish." And there's like, no, you're going through. So that my advice would be ready for anything. You have to take yourself out of your comfort zone, and you have to do whatever is required, because there isn't department number 54 to just ring up on your large speed dial and get all your resources to pull into it. It's all hands on deck, and you've got to all make it happen or you'll go bust.
Very, very true. In closing, before I kind of sign off, there's two things. So first of all, I just want to say, if you want to get hold of Gabby at Huckletree, is her Twitter handle, and if you want to get hold of John, it's at Business Rocks UK. That's rocks in plural, not singular. And I want to thank you both for taking the time out, and ask you if there is one last thing that you would want to say to somebody who is on the cusp of thinking about starting up their own business and, becoming an entrepreneur. What is the one piece of advice that you would give them, Gabby?
I would say definitely go for it. I think it's a really, really exciting time, and as long as you've tested your market and done your research and you know that you've got a product that will be well received and that will be in demand with proven revenue streams, go for it. But I would definitely say raise enough money to pay yourself a decent salary for the first year, because you never know what can happen, and it's definitely not fun living with not enough money to make ends meet.
Totally agree with that one. John, what about you? What would be your one statement?
I would say that there's never been a better time to start a business with more resources available online and physically at meetup groups. I would say do your research, make sure your product's awesome, build a team on equity around you if you're happy to give some equity away, and work harder and smarter than anybody else and use the tools that are around you.
Thanks again for listening to today's session. If you're enjoying the sessions, don't forget to subscribe at digitaljamsessions.com. digitaljamsessions.com